champion. And I'm Kizzy Page, the other half of the NWA World Women's Tag Team Champion. And you better go listen to the Alliance blog. What is it called again? Podcast. Period. You're ugly. Period. Power approved.
Are you ready?
Power.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
I'm building an alliance.
God bless the internet.
Okay, let's party. It's showtime.
It's time for the Alliance Guys podcast, with your hosts Kevin Frazier, Jaden, DKM, and J. Cal.
Hello, folks. David Marquez coming to you from San Bernardino, California, in the School of Hard Knocks. Now, the original reason why we're here today was to talk about the 11th anniversary of the Empire Wrestling Federation. But I've been told, and I'm here hooked up, waiting for a phone call to come through from Bob Trowbridge, the Executive Director of the National Wrestling Alliance. Apparently, there's some major news, and okay, I understand he's on the line right now. Bob Trowbridge, go ahead.
Well, David, as you may know, the NWA and TNA have had a business relationship for the last 5 years that allowed TNA to feature the NWA titles as the centerpieces of their television and pay-per-view broadcasts. The honor and prestige of the NWA titles has been a driving motivation for wrestlers for decades. These titles continue to be the benchmarks by which wrestlers base their legacies and their place in the history of this business. These titles are measuring sticks in our business, period. Unfortunately, in recent months, while some of the best wrestlers in the world have been burning up my phone lines trying to get a shot at the title, Christian Cage has decided to retreat to the safety of wrestling sports entertainers and over-the-hill former names. Well, no more. Effective immediately, I'm stripping Christian Cage of the NWA World Heavyweight title and Team 3D of the NWA Tag Team titles and severing all business relationships with TNA. I wish them well in their future endeavors. Also effective immediately, I'm conducting round-the-clock meetings with the NWA members and board in order to assemble a tournament of the top wrestling talent from around the world. Wrestling fans, within the next several days, NWA will announce a tournament to crown the next NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Wrestlers who will be selected to take part in this tournament will be on the cutting edge of in-ring talent. In the NWA, we honor our tradition, and that tradition has always involved seeking out and giving opportunity to the best wrestling talent around. From Lou Thesz to Gene Kiniski, Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, Terry Funk, Wildfire Tommy Rich, Kerry Von Erich, Dusty Rhodes, Dan Severn, Great Muta, Shinya Hashimoto, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. How many more names do you want? We are the NWA. We are the past, we're the present, and we will be the future. We are professional wrestling. Thank you for your time, David Marquez, and let everyone know to stay tuned to the NWA.
Okay, Bob, I sure will try to relay that to the people at home watching this. Folks, as Bob Trowbridge, Executive Director, just stated, I'm going to try to summarize here with the quick notes that I took, that the National Wrestling Alliance and TNA Wrestling will permanently end their 5-year relationship. Bob said that the NWA titles are the benchmark of this industry and that wrestlers place their legacy upon this championship, or these championships, I'm sorry. He says that the main office back in Charlotte have been bombarded with calls from fighters who are wanting a shot at Christian Cage, and Christian simply has not obliged just yet. And I guess the biggest news out of this whole thing is that effective immediately, and today is Sunday, May 13th, Christian Cage and Team 3D have been stripped of the NWA branded championships. Trowbridge continued with he'll be conducting meetings with NWA officials to establish what will become the NWA World Title Tournament. Folks, I'm just as speechless, I think, as the next person. I heard this just as you did, and I have nothing else more to say other than this is going to open up a brand new opportunity for a lot of young performers out there. So with that, I'm David Marquez. Stay with us here at NWAWrestling.com, and we'll try to get you all the breaking news as it develops.
What do you think about that?
Got any other breaking news from 20 years ago?
No, I don't. But what the heck?
What the hey?
Another video kept playing. I was like, I heard the noises all of a sudden. Mike, that wasn't a green screen. That was a legitimate school. That was the Empire Wrestling Federation School of Hard Knocks. I know this because I have been to the School of Hard Knocks, not as a trainer, but just as a witnesser. That was basically the announcement, insinuating, instructing, constructing the new NWA. We always talk about the timetables with the National Wrestling Alliance. We talk about eras. Of course, right now we're in the Lightning One era. It's a Billy Corgan era. I mean, you could even almost break it down to a few years ago, it was the Nick Aldis era. I don't know what you'd call what we're in right now. Maybe the EC3 era. I don't know. But, before that, there was the Bruce Tharp era. DKM used to work for that NWA office.
Sure.
And then there was, if you go back a little bit further, then there was the Bob Trowbridge at David Marquez era of the NWA. And the reason why I say include David Marquez in that, because at that point in time, it seemed like a lot of the wrestling decisions were coming with a lot of input from Dave Marquez. Do you agree with that?
It was at least perceived that way, if not that way in reality. I don't know what the reality was, but it was certainly perceived that way.
And then, and that was, immediately following the TNA era. And then before that, it goes to like 0-1, and it goes to a lot of what was happening with Howard Brody and Joe Price in Florida. The the NWA, what was that promotion called? It doesn't matter. Essentially, you could break down these eras, and what we were going to talk about tonight, considering that there is no new NWA content, for our international friends, we still stand with you. There will be no power for them yet. And then for those of you who live in the United States, of course, the CW app will be the new home for the all NWA content going forward. But focusing tonight, we would like to talk about the TNA era of the National Wrestling Alliance. And, this idea, it's funny because one of my buddies, or one of my pals who follows Dave Marquez and a lot of wrestling in the industry, he suggested this idea to me a few months ago, and I was like, I don't really want to talk about that. I mean, why talk about stuff that's already passed? But then Jaden said it, and I figured, well, if two people are asking for it, maybe other people care too. So this is like a fantasy what if style. I'm not the watcher, but maybe DKM is, because he was around for all the big moments in the NWA. We're going to kind of look at this. What's that?
Watch it.
Weren't you at the Sportatorium? Didn't you see? Weren't you at the stadium where Kerry won the world's heavyweight title from Ric Flair?
Texas Stadium, yeah.
Texas Stadium, thank you. And so our boy Jaden said, "Hey, why don't we talk about this?" So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what if TNA and NWA never ended their agreement that they had to license the championships. Now, first and foremost, Jaden, you are here, right? He's not. First and foremost, we know that deal was worked out in early 2002 with the idea that they were going to take the 10 pounds of gold off of Dan the Beast Severn, who just almost immediately before this took the title off of Shinya Hashimoto in 0-1. And the idea at the time was that we thought that Severn would re-continue his reign now that he was done with the WWE. He was more or less free and clear. So it was perceived that Dan Severn would be back defending the 10 pounds of gold until the announcement started coming through that TNA, Jerry Jarrett, and Jeff Jarrett had come to terms with the NWA to license the titles, to license the likeness of the NWA. And this kind of spawned a whole new era because honestly, at the time, there was no WCW. WCW was out of business, had been for a while. There was a touring wrestling promotion by the name of World Wrestling All-Stars based in Australia, but it featured many of the talents from WCW. What were your memories of this time in wrestling, DK?
Well, it certainly wasn't the best time in wrestling. What was it? WWA All Stars, AEW,
yeah, World Wrestling All Stars. It was Andrew McManus, I believe, was the name of the promoter, and his background was doing concerts in Australia, bringing big acts to the land down under. And he thought, hey, we could do wrestling. It was kind of based on the success that the Hogan had a pay-per-view in Australia that featured Dennis Rodman versus Kurt Hennig. Do you remember that one?
No,
unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've blotted that one out of my memory. So
bought it for $1 in the dollar store, literally.
Yeah, no, I got one for like 99 cents on eBay. So
more than I would have paid.
Yeah. So talk to me, DK. Then what was your perception of wrestling at that time? In that void of, there was no WCW, the NWA was for the most part underground. There was WWE, and of course there wasn't the exposure. I mean, this all predates YouTube. This predates social media the way we have it now. 2002 was a very different time and place than 2024.
It was a weird thing. Your microphone's making noise. There we go. Yeah, it was a weird time to be a wrestling fan, really, because basically there was WWE, and there was WWE and a bunch of indies. ECW had already failed.
Yes.
WCW had failed, and then both had been merged into the great blob that was WWF, I think, at the time. And so that was basically your wrestling option outside of, whatever little indies were around that may have or may not have had any type of local TV or anything like that. And, people talk about like the super indies, but the only thing that made a super indie was the fact that some wrestling sheet covered it. I mean, basically speaking.
This was the time where I recall, in terms of indie wrestling, there was the ECWA, which was like the big promotion in, I think it was Philly, right, Jaden?
Delaware. So there's ECWA. There was APW in Northern California, where they had a lot of big tournaments, like the King of the Indies, and a lot of very well talented names started wrestling there. I know in Southern California we had UPW, which had ties to the WWE, but not nearly as prominent or big as the other two. And then in February of 2002, this little promotion opened up by a gentleman by the name of, well, I don't want to call him a gentleman, a person by the name of Rob Feinstein. He started this promotion called Ring of Honor that was all based on respecting the wrestling and taking a more serious attitude towards the sport. And that happened just a few months before TNA formed. Jaden, can you think of any more big wrestling promotions in the U.S. that existed at that time? The two predecessors, the two things that really, really helped launch Ring of Honor were the ECWA and Jersey All Pro Wrestling.
That was the other one. Yeah. JAPW. You're right.
JAPW, Jersey All Pro Wrestling, went from being basically a promotion with some local New Jersey indie guys and some hardcore guys and some basically glorified backyard guys
to being one of the most serious wrestling promotions in the state of New Jersey and then in the Northeast. And they really started using a lot of those wrestlers that were big on the tape trading market.
Yes.
That was the way you got your wrestling back then. You didn't have, again, Jay said there was no real YouTube. There was JAPW eventually had a TV show that you had to download in 4 separate parts. And they took you about 4 hours each part to download, and they were about 15 minutes long. And that was really awesome because it was like a worldwide wrestling, and it was actually really, really good. It had a bit of like studio wrestling-esque, where it was younger wrestlers trying to make the name for themselves that were working in JAPW, including JAPW wrestlers, and then from the schools they had, and local schools in the area, and some guys that were on the cards, but they weren't necessarily they were locals, and they weren't necessarily the big names, but they were well known by the locals. And occasionally they brought in some big names. A lot of wrestlers who ended up doing that ended up becoming something. My favorite of them all was Jay Lethal at the time, but a lot of the ones who, ironically, like the SSTs and the guys who ended up later on in TNA and Ring of Honor, kind of started there and got a big name for themselves. And it was really interesting to see these wrestlers and making a name. And Crazy Ivan, who was kind of like a local icon in the area. NECW. I'm trying to remember NECW.
Sheldon Goldberg.
I don't think Sheldon was really promoting much then. I don't remember NECW. The big Northeast promotion back then was
Jersey All Pro and ECWA.
There was a New England Wrestling Federation too that kind of had a name for itself, and I can't think of it.
We, and shame on us, we forgot to also mention there was a little promotion based in Georgia that had a lot of clearance on regional television. They were also on a network, I think it was called One America, where they would actually broadcast their show. This is, again, before YouTube. You could literally go on and watch it. It was super pixelated, never a clear picture, but this little promotion called Wild Side, NWA Wild Side. So,
oh, yeah.
NWA
Wild Side also is one of the reasons you started seeing wrestlers like AJ Styles and other wrestlers from that, speaking of pixelated, to get their name out there. But it was great because you saw these guys before anybody knew who they were, and only the guys who were really, really into the independents knew who these young kids were, and they were starting to make a name for themselves. And I remember when somebody told me, like, Frank was such a good Fat Frank was such a good guy, very, very nice guy. I loved him. Just a nice person to talk to. Always gave me advice when I was starting too. And Wildside did help us get with TNA also. But then again, the wrestling kind of exploded where Jersey All Pro started using guys from California and guys from down from Wildside and guys from Texas and guys from all over started getting into this promote thing because they had a good tape trading name. And then the ECWA had what's called the Super 8, which was the top indie guys that have out there. The original ECWA by Jim Kettner, the talent that they've had on that Super 8 really have made into major names. You might have heard of a couple like Robert Roode, Bobby Roode, AJ Styles. Oh God, I can't think of Crowbar, Devin Storm,
was Christopher
Ace Darling. What was that? Christopher Daniels, Low Key, American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Yeah, it really was great to see these young guys. I used to travel down to see ECWA all the time. It had some comedy stuff, Mr. Ooh La La, the Japanese pool boy, and Boogie Woogie Brown, who was so over. He would come down to one of the "Come on, baby, don't you wanna go?" Do. And he would sit there and he would dance to that thing all the way down, and everybody in the crowd would just go nuts for him. Ace Darling was another one. Lance Diamond, who currently works for the for TNA. No, he worked for both of them and ECW, but I want to say he currently works for the NWA.
Yeah. Kenny, talent relation.
Pat Kenny, yeah. Irish Pat Kenny.
So all of this.
Dawn Marie.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying it was like a plethora of people that became a who's who in professional wrestling. Everybody who became big in the Ring of Honor, not everybody, but a very big chunk of them started off in the ECWA and Jersey All Pro. But it was an exciting time in wrestling for us in the business.
And all of this to say that there was still, even though these promotions were big, there was not a replacement for WCW. There wasn't a second promotion that existed that had television, that was available to a wider viewing audience. And so when the announcement came that TNA Wrestling was coming into formation, of course, they started doing their events in May of 2002. It certainly was a right turn for a lot of pro wrestling. And a lot of the names that you just mentioned, we would end up seeing in TNA almost immediately. Guys like Bobby Roode, guys like Jay Lethal, guys like Low Key, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, and some of the guys you didn't mention, Frankie Kazarian.
Mike Modest. He was also came from that. He used to be in this area, and Donovan Morgan used to be around here a lot.
Did Donovan Morgan and Modest work TNA?
No, but they were. I'm sorry. I was just when you mentioned them, it made me think they wrestled ECWA and Jersey All Pro a lot. The Haas brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
can I tell you something about all that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Nobody here cared. I mean, which is what I think the point we were trying to make, because the Northeast had a lot of promotions. It has a lot of people. It had a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, there was some tape trading, but let's not overstate how big that audience was. Nobody here cared. Now,
and by here you mean Texas?
Well, basically, I really mean people outside the coast didn't care. If you followed a news thing or whatever, you might have thought, oh, or cool or whatever. I mean, the only thing I followed at the time was the NWA. The only reason I knew Wild Outside existed was because they were part of the NWA. The only reason I knew half the promotions, existed was if they were in the NWA and if they actually ran, which a lot of them didn't. And so, like all these big promotions that, yes, did feature people who went on to do other things in the area, most of the country didn't know them and didn't care.
Dude, they got a lot of exposure, though. They did. They got
they got exposure with the right people.
Yeah, but PWA magazine was always featuring them. Everything in there, especially the ECWA, was always featured in the PWA magazine. And then all the tape traders, if you got those lists, they were always the featured videos that people were buying.
And I'm not trying to deny any of that, but I'm just saying, in the greater scheme of things, people didn't care.
Outside of the coast.
People outside of those areas, really the coast. For some reason, the coast kind of kept track of each other. But a lot of it's because that's also where the journalists were. So, there weren't many journalists in the dirt sheets that were in Texas watching Texas promotions.
Sure.
There weren't many journalists in Missouri watching Missouri promotions. Or Kansas or wherever you want to put them. So, yeah, I mean, Wildside actually did air here. You could get it here on some station, America One or whatever things. And, and they had a tendency to draw about 90 people to their studio show. And so, but there wasn't anything. There wasn't anything that was really nationwide wrestling fan enthusiastic. People were hoping that maybe TNA could capture some of that.
Yeah, and they're actually hoping Ring of Honor too, even though I think it was not made for never has been made for a nationwide audience. It just wasn't the way it was designed, not made to be. But I know a lot of people were really hoping it would have sprouted off into something bigger. And it actually started to, because they started using some people like Eddie Guerrero that really got a lot of, again, attention out there. But then the Feinstein thing happened, and that kind of really put them into a bubble. And here, again, they had promotions. One of the ones that didn't get a lot of credit, Steve Carino used to run in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he was using some former ECW guys, and he was using some big names, and he was using Samoa Joe. and he used Samoa. Well, he was working Ring of Honor, but Samoa Joe wasn't that big yet. The first company I ever see use Samoa Joe really right was Carino's PWF, I think it was called, or PWF, I think. I would ask a question about Mike earlier about Mike Motion. Is that Mr. Motion? Used to wrestle the name under the name Mr. Motion Shane Taylor, and now wrestles under the name Main Event Michael Mars. M5 asked me. If so, yeah, I actually wrestled against him. But yeah, there was a lot of great wrestling in the area. Unfortunately, we had Wildside on TV, and that's why CZW and Wildside used to actually feud with each other. There was a story of Stevie Richards winning a local NWA championship and going down to Wildside and refusing to lose because he was seen in our local area, and he didn't want the championship he held being seen losing on another television program that was seen in the area.
Is that how the Briscoes got down to Wildside?
Yeah, actually, that is exactly how the Briscoes got down the Wildside, because there was a CZW Wildside group, and that's why you started seeing like a lot of those Wildside guys. And then Ruckus used to travel between the two of them anyway. In fact, I think Ruckus probably was more known in Wildside than he was in this area until because of Wildside, though, he became known in this area and started working with CZW. But it was neat seeing a lot of those guys in person. Those guys I would see on Channel 48 at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it was interesting to, I think, anybody that was just a long-term wrestling fan. And I think, that's what helped a lot of these places with there were long-term wrestling fans. I don't know how many of them actually grew a lot of their own fans, new fans, so to speak, until you've been around for a while, like ROH eventually did. But you were saying ROH was never really set up to be a national thing, and it was kind of the same thing with ECW. I think the biggest mistake Paul Heyman ever made with ECW was trying to make it more than what it was.
He had to, though, to keep the guys that he was having. That was a problem. If he didn't expand, he was going to lose the talent. So he was going to lose either way. So I guess he was going to try to lose fighting than not.
Well, he owed a lot of people a lot of money when he left. So
still owes it, if I understand.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who do not have pleasant things to say about him.
Even the ones he owes money to has nice things to say about him. To just don't lend him money.
Yeah. You would think he would have made enough money working the WWE to pay those guys back, by the way. All of this to say that there was an availability for a promotion to kind of take over all of the remnants of what WCW was, and that was Jerry Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett, if you listen to the Jeff Jarrett podcast, one of his first episodes was talking about the formation of TNA wrestling, and it was his idea to include these NWA titles. And essentially, he said what we've all kind of said, is that it lent credibility to a brand new promotion to have the same title that was worn by Ric Flair, by Kerry Von Erich, damn all the people in between that held the 10 pounds of gold, like Chris Candido or any of those people. But linking that belt lineage back to Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Harley Race, really had that history. And that's what they were going for with TNA, was trying to latch on to some of the history that was created by the NWA. Is that how you remember it, DK? Or do you remember it differently?
Oh, no, that's exactly what they were trying to do. Was they were basically doing what Billy and Lagana said at the beginning. They were trying to take a name that had historic value, but they were trying to restart it.
Yeah.
Which I think was actually a bad decision on their part. And trying to crown all new champions and everything like that. But
That was a bad idea, and I don't understand why. Severn wasn't available for the first pay-per-view.
That's
so you
right.
have
That's
the gauntlet for the.
kayfabe.
Yeah, I know, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, but it's 100% kayfabe. Severn just won the title so he could bring it back from Japan. That was the only reason. And
do you think he knew that, by the way?
I've been told that yes. Well, I have been told that they did want to see if they could get him on the first episode to lose to Shamrock, but I think that was the NWA that was trying that. Jarrett always wanted to crown new champions. They basically wanted to ignore everything from them last being on WCW, and they want to be the NWA revival.
Real quick, can we just say that was such a missed opportunity for them to have a matchup that had happened in UFC that did not happen in the WWE, a match that fans wanted to see was the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, taking on the Beast, Dan Severn, in a pro wrestling ring. Like, I honestly think that would have been a much better way to introduce TNA wrestling to the world than having a gauntlet for the gold that at the end Ken Shamrock won by beating mostly no-namers, right? I mean,
well, not just that, but that the fans hated the concept so much that Jeff Jarrett actually made fun of the concept on the first episode. Well, why are we doing this? Isn't you moron? You're the one who's doing it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where enough kayfabe was already dead that everybody knew. And the other thing was that everybody knew that Jarrett wanted the title so that he could hold it.
Right.
And, it only took, he let two people hold the title briefly before him. And then, of course, they went broke. And then, a really good what if is what if their original strategy, their original plan would have worked out. But yeah, that was kind of a mess from the beginning. And then it was almost like today. There are times when I appreciate efforts at kayfabe, and there are times when it's stupid. And like with the tag team titles, what were the name of the twins that won it?
The Shane twins.
Shane twins, which we can talk about whether that was a good idea or not. But, then there was like, oh, well, that was a controversial win. And I don't remember why it was controversial, but it was controversial. And, maybe the wrong twin was in or something stupid like that. And so they vacated the titles to be filled in TNA without either the Shane twins or whoever the tag team champions before that. They, of course, they were totally out of it. There was a controversial end to their match, so we have to vacate the titles because of that, but they're not included in how we're going to fill the titles.
Did either of you watch the first episode, the first pay-per-view?
I watched the first 5.
So similarly, I ordered the first one because I didn't understand it was going to be a weekly thing. And I was like, holy crap, this is cool. And at that point in time, I had gone to a lot of indies, specifically UPW in Southern California, and some of the smaller indies. And so, like, the guys on the card, I was familiar with AJ Styles, Low Key, Jerry Lynn, of course. Psychosis was on the card. And then, some of the names that were in the gauntlet for the gold, like Steve Corino, former world champion. Conan was going to be in it. When Conan could actually still wrestle. And then Rick Steiner and Scott Hall. And you're like, all right, there's some decent names in this thing. So I ordered it with these huge expectations. And I think right around match number 2, when Tio defeated Hollywood in a midget match, I think I was already checking out on the whole concept. I mean, the 6-man tag with the Flying Elvises, that was weird, but you at least, you had a decent match with Styles and Lynn and Low Key taking on Yang, Estrada, and Siaki. But by the time we got to the Johnsons versus James Storm and Psychosis, I was kind of already done. And, at that point, I didn't know who Trevor Murdoch was, so I had no excitement at all for the Depths versus Christian York and Joey Matthews.
Because he wasn't Trevor Murdoch yet.
Yeah, I never heard of him at that point, and I was not impressed by the Depths. I remember thinking York and Matthews were like a Hardy clone tag team, and I mean that's just because I had no experience with them. And I was kind of disappointed in this pay-per-view, and I didn't order the second one because of that very reason. You ordered the first 5, DK. Tell me, why did you order 5 of them?
I was an idiot. Well, I mean, they were $10.
Yeah, they were cheaper.
So the idea was, and who came up with the idea has been argued, and some of the people involved have passed on since. So I don't know whose idea it really was. But the idea was that instead of doing weekly television, they would do weekly 2-hour pay-per-views at $10. And pay-per-views at the time were about $40. And so it was like you spend the same amount of money in a month, but you get more wrestling.
Yeah.
What was the concept? Well, of course, everything went to hell in a handbasket for their very first one. Because for people who don't remember, the original idea was they were going to tour through the NWA promotions and hopefully get guys to work NWA shows, like that weekend or whatever, get everybody some work and maybe feature some of the talent on the undercard. Well, they go to do their first one and they're selling ringside tickets for like, what was it, $25 or something like that? And everybody was like, well, why would I pay $25 for a ringside ticket and I can go home and watch it for $10? So what if they were, I don't know what they were expecting, but let's say they were expecting 1,000 people and they have like, 200 or something because nobody was interested in paying extra. So right after the very first show, they had to completely refinagle how they were going to do this. And at some point, that's when they ended up at the fairgrounds.
Very next event, the very next taping, because they did 2 tapings at the Alabama setting, if I remember.
I think
the very next one was at the fairgrounds, and it put Burt Prentice out of business because he was doing very well, running there weekly, I think, and TNA started giving away free tickets.
Well, and Burt Prentice is the one that put the deal together.
Yeah.
He was the one that had the rights to the fairgrounds. So Bill Behrens came to him and said, we really need a deal or whatever. And he was like, well, sure. But I don't think he realized at the time that they were going to not charge for the tickets. And so, yeah, like you said, he goes, people could go see that for free. He goes, then why would they pay to see my people? He goes, so yeah, that was one of the worst deals he ever he ever made. And then of course they blew through a year's budget in 3 months, and then their financial backer had to back out because they were having all sorts of ethical and financial problems. So yeah, it was not a good start to business.
I remember, people don't realize back in the day, it's 6 to 8 months to get paid for pay-per-view. And nobody decided to find that out when they started this company, from what I'm told. So here they are expecting these big pay-per-view buys with all this money coming in and not realizing that they would have to, basically, they wouldn't even get their first check 6 to 8 months after.
Wow.
And that's after the pay-per-view and everybody else got their cut of it.
Yeah, and the talent wasn't going to wait.
Yeah. But I think they worked out a deal with WWA because a lot of the TNA guys were still working the World Wrestling All-Stars. It wasn't quite over yet, the tours in Australia. And that's when I started bringing the NWA title to Australia with the WWA. And I think that guy helped a bit. And I think they had other ways, but they really needed something. And then they started recording matches to put on TV every week on syndication. I think Barron's helped him out on that one because it was showing up on all the same stations that Wildside was, and to try to help sell the pay-per-views too.
So I guess, we're talking a little bit about the time. We're talking a little bit about TNA. Of course, this deal, it seemed like to me that it was kind of deteriorating all along, because initially the plan was that they were going to tour in NWA areas and NWA territories to help pop the local audience. And then that didn't really happen. There was a lot of speculation that talent from the NWA would be included so that, your local champion might be on TV. That didn't really happen either. And then over, obviously I'm jumping ahead 5 years, but over the course of time, there started becoming trials and tribulations by getting, certain champions on NWA cards. So we're like Pori Hemplo, our very own David Marquez, was booking a wrestling show in I believe it was in Massachusetts at the Songs Arena, and initially was trying to get Sting to defend the 10 pounds of gold on that show, and was unable to do that. They ended up later getting Christian Cage, who was the world champion, and he defended the title on that show. And that was only maybe one of maybe 5 title defenses that Christian Cage had outside of a TNA pay-per-view. Do you guys recall that?
I know he had more because I know I was supposed to manage him for one, but that didn't end up working out because I couldn't get to the building.
Well, I know.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. It was a TNA championship defense. It wasn't a NWA because it wasn't for an NWA promotion.
Got it.
Well, I remember like AJ Styles was booked for Wildside to come defend the title, and then he lost it to Jeff Jarrett before. So then they put this big thing on the screen where Jeff Jarrett goes, "Well, he's not coming to Wildside. He's too big for that." But AJ Styles still made an appearance, and it was really a mess. They had to completely renegotiate their original deal, according to I believe it was Fred. Has said this in the past in interviews, that basically the original deal, they didn't get any, like the NWA itself wasn't getting any money for any of this, because the idea was it was going to work by them going through the promotions, which I don't know why the promoters really cared, because 90% of the NWA promoters didn't run shows at that time. They just had affiliates. But
if they ran into the area, they're supposed to pay the territory to run the NWA shows, and that's why. So the affiliates didn't have to run. Impact or TNA could run and then just pay them a fee.
Right, and of course that didn't happen. So then they reworked it to where they actually did get a licensing fee for the use of the titles. So of course all the old retired promoters were happy with that, because the NWA was making money really without having to do anything.
Go ahead, Jaden.
I was working for NWA Fred Rubenstein's promotion. And I think it was NWA Over the Top at the time. I might be wrong. I think it was, though, because it was Fred and Doc Diamond, who was a story all on his own. But I remember the excitement because they would put on the pay-per-views and we would watch them backstage while we were doing the thing. All the events were playing on continuously. They'd have a tape, and it would be like every one of the pay-per-views we're watching. Fred was pointing himself out. Because he was in a couple of them. And how excitement it was, and what it was going to be was like, oh yeah, you guys are going to be working these TNA shows, and when they come to New Jersey, it's going to be you guys on the card, and you guys are going to be featured. And it was really kind of, they were really pumping this all up, and I think that was what the plan was, because that's what they were going on about. And they were talking about how
saying the same thing here in Texas.
Yeah. That's what it was. And they were talking about how, like, you guys are going to be on the same cards with these talents, and you're going to be featured and mentioned, and the champions are going to be defending the titles and stuff and all that cool stuff. And yeah, I remember that.
We learned from Jarrell Clark, who was on late last year, that, when they brought him in, they did mention once or twice that he was the World Junior Heavyweight Championship, but that belt was never seen on Impact Wrestling. He never had a title defense as part of the on that show. And at that point, Gerald Clark was kind of a big name.
I don't think he was a big name, but he was starting to become a name for himself. He was so talented too. I wonder whatever happened to him. But he was, he had a good name for himself. He was starting to make it right then and there. And the NWA Championship, Junior Heavyweight Championship, helped put him even further, I think, into that spotlight.
Our pal Lutha said, has Fred ever checked in here? Not really. We had Fred on a few years ago. And Fred, this was right around the time of the Lightning One era when Billy purchased the NWA. And Fred had his 2 cents, and it kind of just became more of him bashing the NWA and Billy Corgan. So after he came on, I didn't really want to bring him back on again because it was kind of like rehashing previous appearances on the podcast. And then when Dave Marquez came on, he just wanted to come on and literally refute everything that Dave had said. So it's like this was kind of getting to be kind of pointless to have him on. And as much as I respect Fred, I don't want to just rehash everything that we've already discussed ad nauseum, you know?
All right, so Impact TNA, so we're just calling it TNA again for some reason. TNA wasn't keeping up with the defending the belts and working the shows, and it was real hard. And promotions were working the champion, but they were working in promotions that weren't NWA. Like Jersey All Pro constantly had Christian Cage as champion. I think they had AJ Styles as champion too.
AJ Styles defended the title in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, Combat Zone Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and in Italy, in a promotion in Italy. And the only really NWA promotions, he did occasionally do some for NWA Bluegrass. And he did one of those Mid-Atlantic shows where they went to Korea. And him and Jeff Jarrett had a championship match in South Korea.
Which is cool.
No, I thought that was great. Like, and that was one of those times where like, okay, this could probably work. Like, this makes sense. But for every instance of, AJ Styles willing to do matches on the independents, and even Jeff Jarrett was working some of those matches on the independents, you were having guys like Sting, who basically his booking was not affordable for the most promoters to use, and Christian Cage was pretty darn close to not, pricing himself out of being used. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but see, he was a former WWE guy.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying he wasn't worth it. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. I'm saying that because his price was so high, the NWA couldn't afford to book him. And if you can't afford to book the champion, then you can't, you know what I mean? It gets to a point where like TNA, if you're putting the belt on guys that we can't afford to bring in, then it makes it difficult. And they started doing title defenses or title changes without permission from the National Wrestling Alliance. That was another issue for the NWA. Because it was like, again, I know Dave Marquez was on here and basically said that the switch with Christian was not approved by the board of directors for the NWA.
Yeah, they should have. I don't know who the lawyer is at the time. Was it Trobich? I don't know.
Yeah, it was Trobich.
They definitely should have had a better verbiage on what that was going around. I think the guys were just so desperate for any kind of attention. They just did another WWE stupid deal just for the publicity.
100%. With 100% certainty, they wanted to get an opportunity to put the brand out there. And I think it wasn't a bad play. It just didn't work out the way that anybody had wanted it to. And I, obviously DKM will be back momentarily, but we're getting to the point now where it's like, well, what would have happened had everyone played ball, and I guess what I'm saying is, had the members of the National Wrestling Alliance, the board of directors, just said, you know what, we're cool with just getting a check every month. And, in the meantime, we will present the North American Championship as our top title. We'll present the North American Tag Team Champions as our top tag team, and just disregard, the two world titles that were featured on Impact. I mean, I guess that's where we're heading, right?
Yeah, unless you're Billy Firehawk, who was able to afford them all.
What was his 9 to 5 job? Are you allowed to say?
From the best I understood, his wife worked in something in the adult industry, and she funded NWA cyberspace.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's incredible.
And he was the Tony Khan of the air. What did the Tony Khan on Wish or on Temu? At the time, he didn't have nearly as much money, but he wanted a bunch of wrestlers to play with and didn't care about drawing a crowd.
Well, they did
nice guy though.
They did pretty decent in terms of independent shows, though, if I recall correctly.
No, from the few that I attended, there was about 200 people there and like a
$10,000 budget.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Mercer, I guess what we're getting ready to talk about now is the NWA's had the NWA and the TNA group had been able to work together. I mean, what do you predict would have happened? Obviously, the big concerns, the big hangups for the NWA were they were unable to book the world champion at an affordable rate for the promoters, and that they weren't getting the promised TV time that they initially agreed to. TNA was getting bothered by having to clear title changes by the NWA and jumping through the NWA, hoops that they kept presenting. So how would it have been different? How could they have worked that agreement to make it work?
Well, to clarify one thing, they did not have to get their title changes approved. Okay. It was made very clear that when they did the thing where they got the money, TNA got complete control of the titles.
Okay. I guess I wasn't aware of that.
They could do whatever they wanted. They were supposed to give them a heads up.
Okay.
Now, whether that was written into the contract or not, we'll let somebody else talk about. You talk to 4 different NWA promoters who read the contract, and you'll get 4 different answers on almost every issue. So before any of them chime in here and go, "That's not true," well, you all work it out amongst yourselves. Yeah, it's just, the truth of the matter is, now there was a liaison between the NWA and TNA.
Terry Taylor, right?
Well, on the NWA's half.
Okay.
Or Prince. No. Yeah.
Ed Schumann was, and then the promoters were supposed to go through Ed Schumann. A lot of them didn't. They would just contact TNA directly. And, so just all sorts of crazy things. I think it's fair to say that by the time the relationship ended, somebody once asked me, they go, "What do you think the NWA would look like today if Tharp and his group had never taken over?" I go figure out what all the promoters are doing now that were members back then. I go, and that's what it would look like today.
Tony Givens, Dave Marquez, and that's about it.
Dr. Zirconium.
Dr. Zirconium, absolutely. Shame on me.
Fred, Howard, I don't know. There were others. It was just, again, most of them didn't even run, promote themselves. And
at the time, there was a lot of them, though. There was a good number of promoters when they took over.
Yeah, and so, what would the NWA look like? Well, whatever TNA's done, everything that's happened with the TNA titles is what would happen with the NWA title. Oh yeah, I tried to block Rick out of my mind.
No, I meant Rick Del Santo, who's in the chat. A good Rick, not a bad Rick. A Rick that I like and I would enjoy having a meal with, not a Rick that I would publicly shame.
Wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
Anyway, apparently more than one of them was.
Yes, they were.
So, anyway, getting back to where, saying, where would the NWA be today? Well, I mean, the NWA and its titles probably be whatever. I would actually think probably at some point TNA would have bought out the NWA name. That would be my guess. At some point, they just would have said, "Here, we'll give each of you owners, X number of dollars and go away."
And Dave Marquez has said on this show that it was offered. TNA wanted to buy the NWA. Antonio Inoki wanted to buy the NWA. And all of those got refuted then and now. And Sinclair wanted to buy the NWA. And none of those ever came to fruition. I wonder, why do you think that is?
Greedy people wanted to take advantage of it for themselves.
That's fair.
I mean, seriously, that's, wrestling partnerships. I mean, look, when Bruce and Chris and Fred took over, there was only 3 of them, and Fred was gone within 3 months. And then Chris was gone within a couple of years, I guess 4 years. And, people don't agree. One person wants this, another person wants that. Chris was originally partnered with Chris Ronquillo originally partnered with the Taylor family down in Houston when he started Lone Star.
Yeah.
And, that lasted 6 months. And then, Chris bought them out, although he still used them and, like a lot of their talent.
Bought them out.
Yeah.
Didn't they sue him to get out too?
I don't remember.
Okay. I strike that from the record, Your Honor. I don't want a libel suit coming at me later.
I think they got along well enough that it was just don't quote me on the dollar amount, but let's say like, here's $1,000. Just let me, own and control it.
I was always under the impression that the Taylors were forced out by Ronquillo and by Tharp, but that's maybe my impression was wrong.
No, if I remember right, they were forced out by the board of directors, and then they were offered to Ronquillo and Tharp, and that's where everything went to shit.
You're thinking of Ken Taylor.
Oh, yes. Who were you thinking of? Chaz Taylor.
Chaz Taylor and.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You can see my confusion. Okay, enough said.
He means Tug and Chaz. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good Taylors, not the bad Taylors. No.
They own well. Ken was an okay guy.
You know what? Ken was good to me. I'll say that.
Ken was an okay guy. He was old school. And a lot of people didn't like that. And they didn't have to tolerate it. So, they would go on and do their own things. But
is Ken Taylor still alive?
Yeah. Yeah. I still talk to him occasionally.
Next time you see him, tell him I said hi.
Yeah. He's retired from everything now. So
you guys hang out?
Like me.
As I say, you guys hang out at the retirement club?
Not yet.
Soon.
Soon.
All right. Well, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this, because the whole point of the show is what would have happened if the TNA NWA agreement never ended. And it's got to be more than, well, you see what happened with the TNA, that's what would have been the NWA. So let's talk about let's get to the meat here.
Well, I was going to say my answer is that TNA would have eventually bought out.
So that's it. The end of the podcast. Good night, everybody.
Well, I mean,
it means Dixie would have owned NWA. That means the Owl would own the NWA now.
So the NWA would be on Axis, and right now Nick Nemeth would have debuted for the NWA.
Probably.
Yeah. Hogan would have been part of the NWA, and Bischoff would have been part of the NWA.
Well, the real question is, once they got rid of Dixie Carter and done anything, like, Jeff Jarrett was forced out, formed his own stupid promotion that never did anything.
Global Force. They produced the 70th anniversary of NWA. That's why you can still see it on Fight Trailer.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, as far as the promotion was concerned, it was the next big thing. Every time someone talks about the next big thing, I start counting to see how long until it fails miserably.
Yeah, I get that.
You finally got it with Brock Lesnar.
Oh, it took a while. It took a while to get there. That's a wild story for another time.
I read the thing. I don't think it's ever going to be time.
You're probably right on that. So okay, that's DKM's take that the NWA would be just basically what TNA wrestling is now, but branded under the NWA name. Now, with that being said, with everything that happened after that, TNA rebranded from TNA to Impact Wrestling. For a brief time was Global Force Wrestling. Now, then back to Impact, and now again back to TNA. Do you think that they would have, if they would have bought the NWA name, that it would have been rebranded, or would it have just been the name of the title? Or if you're looking in your tea leaves, Mr. Mercer, what do you see happening?
I think you keep the NWA name as you did. I think Impact, the TV show, probably would have been rebranded Global Force, the TV show. And then when that fell apart 2 weeks later, they just would have gone back to Impact. I don't know that. I think NWA would have replaced TNA just as the name over time. I mean, would they ever bring it back? I don't know. Let's remember TNA was a childish play on terms.
It was awful.
Remember the Dancing Girls? Did we talk about that while I was gone?
No,
we didn't. Yeah. But I remember who was
Dancing
their name?
Girls in the Cage. They were in
Bubblegum or something? Lollipop? Goldilocks was the announcer. There was one of the Dancing Girls was a Lollipop or something like that.
I don't remember. I do remember the one thing they did do for the NWA briefly. I don't even remember how long it lasted. Was briefly they would scroll across the screen upcoming shows.
Yeah, that lasted about 3 months. Not even 2 months.
If you told me 3 shows, I would have believed you more.
That the same model that the Jarretts introduced for TNA wrestling was the same model that Dave Marquez was trying to do with Primetime Live. We got about 3 months worth of Primetime Live before they finally stopped doing that on a weekly basis. But someone out there did effort to make that Jarrett idea work. It just didn't pan out for them either. Jade, what are your thoughts if the NWA and TNA never ended their agreement? DKM says it would be gone. Or it would just be the NWA. Everything else would pretty much stay consistent. Is that your opinion as well?
It depends on how well they worked out the deal. It could still have NWA regional promotions with the Impact. It just would be, they would have the NWA name, but they wouldn't be, it would be very little different than what they were doing anyway. The benefit is you might be able to get somebody who earned a bit of a run in Impact, like a Lance Hoyt or a Jarrell Clark or something like that to work on one of your events because they have some name out there, just like you do NWA now. Dogs had wrestlers work for Impact at the time, like can't think of his name, Tony Nese. They lived in the area. They worked at TNA, and other wrestlers did the same. It's like no different than when Dog had Wrecking-Ball Legursky.
Yeah.
So those local guys that get on the cards would probably be able to work their local NWA promotion and be a big deal. It'll be, actually, now I think about it, it'll be pretty similar to what the Territories deal now with Billy Corgan. It's just Billy Corgan's NWA seen by less people than Impact is for TNA.
Yeah.
kind of scary when you think about that.
So I'll take it a different approach. Let's say that the deal never happened, and then that means that the NWA, or sorry, that the deal never ended. That means that promoters like, Ken Taylor in Texas, that means Howard Brody in Florida, Dave Marquez in California, Fred Richards in New Jersey, Rick O'Brien in Virginia. I don't remember Mike Porter, I think was NWA in Tennessee, Tennessee. I don't remember exactly which part of Tennessee. Anyways, Dave Republic in Canada. Essentially, these guys would have never had the ability to bring the 10 pounds of gold into their area, at least the way that it ended up materializing. So somebody like Adam Pearce probably never would have had the opportunity to shine the way that he did within the NWA boundaries, which probably means that he never gets that opportunity with Ring of Honor or even later in life with the WWE.
He was doing Ring of Honor before he was doing NWA champion.
As a wrestler, yes, but I don't believe they had him in production until after he had lost the 10 pounds of gold. I think that spotlight of being the world's heavyweight champion made people look at him very differently. I feel like when he became world champion and he wasn't just a Southern California wrestler, but literally was wrestling in Virginia and wrestling in West Virginia, wrestling in Texas and wrestling in Florida, I feel like he really did a good job of being what a world champion's supposed to be. And if not given that opportunity, I don't think people would have looked at him the same way. He was booking wrestling here in Southern California for a little promotion called AWS. He was the head booker there, and he was also a regular on the roster. They were affiliated with the NWA, and the opportunities that he had there are what got him basically in that Ring of Honor position. But I don't think anyone would have looked at him that way had he not been the world's heavyweight champion.
It's plausible. It's funny how you call him a Southern California wrestler, and he really was. But for some reason, always to this day, I think he was a Chicago wrestler.
Yeah, well, I mean, because his career started in Chicago, and it wasn't like he had a short time in Chicago. I think maybe like 5 or 6 years. He did an international tour. He wrestled for that WXO company, and then he had opportunity to go to Power Plant with WCW. He passed on that, and basically came to Southern California and had no plans to go back to wrestling. It was wrestling brought him back in. It's very bizarre. Because I was here, I got to see that story unfold, and I know him well enough to know that wrestling he was done. He was working as an insurance guy. Like he was out of the business, and wrestling came calling, wanted him back in. It started off with Millennium Pro Wrestling, then UPW, Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Then he was working the NWA areas out here, and next thing you know, world's heavyweight champion. It didn't happen overnight, but certainly, as someone who's followed his entire run in Southern California, I did not believe when I saw Adam Pearce that at one day he would be the general manager of Raw, let alone being a 5-time NWA World's Heavyweight Champion.
It was really 3 and 4 that probably made him.
Yes.
Ring 3 and 4.
I think 3 is what made him. I think 3 is one. The first one got eyeballs on him, 100%. There was that brief title change with Albright, and that was, I think, just to put Albright over and help get him to be a more believable competitor for the NWA down the road. So the second run was nothing, but the first run was like, here, look at what he did in such a short amount of time. Then the third reign really solidified him as a world's heavyweight champion, and that's when the international tour started coming, and that was really when he was putting on his work boots and showcasing the NWA and the 10 pounds of gold.
Initially, he wasn't very popular in his first run as the NWA champion.
He wasn't
literally we started. Yeah, he wasn't. Most people said he wasn't supposed to win, and nobody really wanted him to win. It wasn't until his second or third reign that everybody started becoming on the gravy train.
If you look at, they were building up for Bryan Danielson to become world's heavyweight championship, and before anyone said, well, no, it was they literally shot material with him holding the 10 pounds of gold. They were gearing up for an American Dragon World's Heavyweight Champion. Brent Albright would have been a good number 2, but for whatever reason, they put the belt on Pierce as opposed to Albright when Danielson got injured. And I think initially the plan was that they were going to have Danielson and Pierce feud over that title, but then Danielson, I think, got signed by the WWE shortly after that. Yes? No?
No. At some point, and no one's been very clear as to when, at some point, the NWA let Danielson out of their contract with them, so he could sign with ROH. And then
he was already working with ROH, though.
Right, but ROH didn't have a lot of contracted people.
Got it.
And so that was so he could contract with him. And then I think he ended up, not long after, like a year or so later, ended up going to WWE. But, when exactly that happens, again, different board members have said different things. And so
Somebody get his information. Let's contact him and ask him. Somebody get his contact information. We'll contact him and ask him.
We asking Danielson?
Yeah.
I'd believe him before I'd believe most of the promoters. But what's funny is I've always said that you can't trust a wrestling promoter, and I've never had a wrestling promoter disagree with me.
No.
Nope. I know all of them.
So we know that, or in my vision, you don't have a world's heavyweight champion that you had in Adam Pearce. Obviously, if TNA had still had that agreement with the NWA, then Nick Aldis would have been world's heavyweight champion much sooner in his career. But I also feel like his same struggles with TNA would have been similar. I think also without having an NWA promotion like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, their TV was all powered off of that NWA World's Heavyweight Championship for the first few years. If they don't have that title, I don't know if they even are able to get to TV. I mean, part of the prestige of the NWA is the 10 pounds of gold, and that's a title that a lot of people who remember the industry in the 80s, that's the belt is synonymous with pro wrestling, with Ric Flair, with Dusty Rhodes. And when their champion, their guy Adam Pearce, had that belt, all the commercials from KDOC, all the promo stuff, had every photo had Adam Pearce with the 10 pounds of gold, whether he was in gear or not. He was always with that title. I don't know that we would have had a wrestling show like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood.
You might have, but I don't think it would have been as noticed, honestly. I mean, you say the NWA 10 pounds of gold, but I always remember the Heritage title.
Well, yeah, they had that Heritage title. It's a beautiful belt, by the way. Adam Pearce was the first Heritage champion, and I was in the Orleans Arena. You guys remember Dave Marquez was running smaller arena shows, bigger than what Billy Corgan's running now. And at the Orleans Arena, it could probably fit easily 15,000 people. There wasn't 15,000 people there. With comps and everything else, there might have been 5, maybe. Ringside was filled. The seats on the floor were filled, but there were people up on the
nosebleed section.
Yeah, I mean not nosebleed, but yeah, there were, and then it was curtained off, so it was no way near 15,000, maybe not even 5,000 to be completely honest. But there
sounds bigger than what AEW is doing right now.
I mean, it was kind of on the same. Honestly, I was there. Look, I was at the T-Mobile Arena for Double or Nothing last year, and I was at the Orleans Arena when it was the NWA Pro Wrestling Summit, and I got to tell you, the crowds were about the same. I mean, I slightly give the nod to AEW, but not by a whole lot.
When Blue Demon came in to defend the title for Ken Taylor down in, I don't think it was actually in Corpus, but it was somewhere down in that area. No, it wasn't that far down. But
by the way, that's such a racist name for a city, Brownsville, right next to Mexico. That's racist.
You would know. And But they drew. I want to think they drew like 1,600. It was whoever the Gulf Coast promoter was at that time,
Ben Gallivan.
Yeah, but they drew like 1,600 for that show.
Because I asked Dave Marquez once, "Hey, Dave, why didn't Blue Demon get booked more?" And he goes, "Shit, I don't know. Nobody wanted to book a Mexican." And I said, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "Oh yeah. Bill Barron said that Lucha Libre doesn't draw in Georgia. Right now, there's one of the bigger promotions in Georgia. I don't know if it's right now, but it was maybe 2 years ago a promotion called MLD, Mucha Lucha Association or something like that, and they were doing huge numbers. I feel like people didn't want to use Blue Demon because they didn't know how to advertise to that audience, but I feel like Demon did good business with the NWA. A lot of those arena shows that Dave Marquez was doing was on the back of Lucha Libre and specifically Blue Demon Jr. That's before they had the 10 pounds of gold.
I will say that he did go work for WOW in Houston before it became Lone Star, NWA Lone Star. And, he only drew a couple hundred there. But,
sure.
Yeah, everything's what you do and put out and stuff like that. And, yeah, they were right in the heart of heavy Mexican influenced area. And, boy, he was able to draw that day. They came to DFW. This was Adam Pearce during his first reign.
Yeah.
They came to DFW and did an arena show and drew generously 250. And so everything was how it was promoted. A lot of the arena shows were sold shows, which is fine. Nothing against sold show. But then it was how hard the arena or whoever bought the show was pushing.
Sure.
So Jaden, just curious, what are your thoughts on sold shows in general?
They're great for the business because then you don't have to worry about it. But the problem is a lot of these promoters see the sold show and don't care, so they give you the bare minimum. To do a sold show, if you want to continuously get them, you got to give them their money's worth. I know Dog has 2 sold ones at Rowan University and Rowan College of Burlington County coming up, and they go out of their way to give them an actual good card and a good wrestling event, so the kids absolutely love it and give them something. And then they put the matches, now that they're allowed, they put the matches on YouTube, and it's real fun to see those loud reactions of those kids and the way the building looks and them all around the balconies and stuff. If you have a sold event, you should make sure to go out of your way, even if the promotion won't, or the people selling it won't, go out of your way to promote it as much as possible.
What's insane about that to me is like there, besides the Ohio State Fair shows that the NWA did back-to-back years, one of those years was when Adam Pearce became NWA World's Heavyweight Champion to like maybe 30 people in the stands. It was so badly promoted, I guess. And at that time, Dave Marquez had been doing a lot of the arenas in the Southwest. Bill Barron's had done a few shows in the Midwest, in Michigan and in Ohio, and none of them drew well. But I mean, they were using, I know for the NWA Michigan show, they had Scott Steiner, Trevor Murdoch, I mean, some legitimate names, and they still didn't draw very well. Do you guys recall that?
Unfortunately, yeah. DK, you're still silent.
Hello? Oh, yeah, I do remember. And, we had Bill Burns on, and we kind of asked him about that. And one thing about Bill is that he was honest. And he acknowledged he was not a promoter. He said, no, Bert, now that was a promoter, type of guy that could sell, ice cubes to Eskimos. And, but Bill, not so much. And so it depended on, again, who was buying shows and how much, promoting they did and what all they did. And and everything. What the expectations are. I remember someone got mad when a place ran a large arena. I want to say, like, I'm making numbers up here, but let's say it was like a 10,000 person arena and they drew 500 or whatever. They go, why would you do that? I go, well, because they got the building really cheap, because the building wanted something,
Yeah.
Was needing something. And they go, no, there was no plans to sell it out. That was never the thought. But the thought was they could get more people than they normally got, and they could get a big building cheap.
Yes.
And it's not like it was being recorded, so nobody was sitting there going, oh, look at that empty building, on TV or whatever. So it was just a fun thing for the people that were there.
I will say this, that Marquez recorded all of his shows, but the reason why that's relevant is because then he put those shows on different platforms that generated money for him. So like he did those Southwest tours with guys like Blue Demon and El Hijo del Santo and Psicosis and La Parca, La Parquita, and all those luchadors that he put on those shows, and then turned around and made DVDs and sold those through Big Vision and got paid a second time for that content. And then the third time around, there was this little company called, what was it called? Oh, I'm going to hate myself for not remembering it. But it was, this was like, again, in the infancy of live streaming. There was a company that did, they did like basically you could watch TV on your phone. And we're talking like 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011, that kind of era. So it was still kind of a new technology. And they had I think it might've been called Fight On. And they would do like a live stream where people would battle. It's kind of like what you see on TikTok now when you have two people in a live going against each other. And I remember I used to stay up all hours at night just watching people be weird on that app. But they also had channels dedicated to one of them was like to Lucha Libre, which was just all the Big Vision Lucha Libre stuff. One of them was an NWA channel, which literally featured all those arena shows that Dave Marquez had filmed. So it's like he made money three different ways on those shows: the live selling the show, selling the DVD, and then streaming it on that app. And it's like if the NWA was smart, why could they figure out how to do these things today?
Hey, quick question.
Yes.
Going back to the original theme of this, TNA keeps the world titles and the world tag team titles.
Yes.
Could the NWA have taken something, like you guys talked about the North American titles, and I can kind of see that, but
yeah,
that still sounds so limited in a way. Could they have taken something like the Heritage titles and built them up in a way to be, I don't want to say rivals, but
relevant?
Yeah, so, relevant.
Prestigious?
There we go. That's the word. Prestigious in a top title sort of way that the NWA could have used. Could they have, could something have happened that said, okay, these are titles that are now going to fall under board control or whatever you want to say. Could something like that have been built up?
If you're asking me, I'd say yeah. And Dave was trying to do that. I think
there's not a wrong answer here. I'm just curious.
So Ken Taylor calls me up, and this had to be like 2009, 2010. And Ken Taylor had my number because he had actually sent me a lot of wrestlers to come on the podcast. You guys remember we between DKM's like, hey, talk to this guy. Hey, I know this guy. Ken Taylor was sending me talent. Ken Taylor sent me Lance Hoyt, sent me Lance Cade, sent me Matt Bourne. A lot of guys came directly from Ken Taylor, so very grateful for him for that. But
Charlie Haas.
What's that?
Did you have Charlie Haas?
Yeah, I don't know if he remembered doing that podcast. but we had like such a great relationship. And he called me up one day and he was pissed. And he goes, "Why am I not getting these world title matches? Why am I not getting these matches?" And I said, Ken, why do you need the title match? Why do you need that? Why don't you just do what Marquez did and build your own title? And honestly, like, that Heritage title had a lot of significance and a lot of meaning. And it was, in a short time before the world title came back to the NWA promoters, Dave Marquez was running these arena shows with this Heritage Championship, the NWA Heritage title. And it was like his main feud for that belt was Adam Pearce and Sean Waltman. Sean freaking Waltman. Like, I don't think Sean Waltman's at what I would consider a draw, but he certainly has value. And that's what, the genesis of the Heritage title was built on, was a rivalry between Adam Pearce and Sean Waltman. And they were, it wasn't just that match, but it was those matches with talent from Wrestling Society X, which had just, was still fairly new, and talents from Mexico, Lucha Libre. And this menagerie of Wrestling Society X meets NWA talent, meets, local Dave Marquez talent and Lucha Libre talent. And that's what got you these shows. So to answer your question, DCAM, yeah, absolutely. I do believe that the NWA could have, each local territory could have had their own title, whether it be a board control title like the North American or a made up title like the Heritage title.
I guess it's my turn. I agree. It could be. I don't think the NWA knew how to do it. So the answer is yes and no. If they had somebody who actually knew how to get the title out there and get the prestige and get the publicity and get the names and get the matches and get them on so they could be seen and the results out to all the websites and all the internet stuff and get people talking about it and get the publicity, yes, it could have. I just don't believe that anybody in the NWA either had the authority to do it or the know-how to do it. What about you, DK?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. And then again, I think the NWA's biggest weakness was always the promoters really only cared what they were doing. And so, it was after they got the world titles back, it was hard to get them to book the world championship. I mean, we talked about Wildside. I think Wildside, I remember them booking Sabu as world champion.
They brought in Sabu, and they didn't. Carino didn't wrestle there, I don't think.
No, I don't really. Did Rapida wrestle there?
Rapata did wrestle for Wildside a couple times, and because he was associated with Prentice, and they used to work with talent together too.
Well, like a Wildside used to be basically, I guess, Music City Wrestling was in Memphis, and that's where Rapata and Prentice kind of were there, and then they became a part of the NWA at the same time. With you had Bill Barons kind of come in and do their TV, and that whole menagerie kind of led to them building Wildside. It initially wasn't supposed to be. Bill Barons wasn't looking to start that wrestling promotion. It was kind of built out of necessity because they needed to make TV after Music City Wrestling.
Yeah, and it was really like a merge. The NWA had put in a Georgia promoter.
Yeah.
Some moron. I can't remember his name. And he lasted about a year. And they actually sent Barons down there to open up Music City, Atlanta, which wasn't part of the NWA, but was running in competition. And then once Moose or whatever his name was left, and then it became NWA Georgia, and then they merged with another promotion, NS something or SN or XYZ or some initials that didn't make any sense for wrestling. And then that's where Wildside was born.
NCW, wasn't it?
What?
Yes.
NCW.
That sounds right. So, but yeah, that's how Wildside was born. And then, eventually all the titles took over there. I remember they had a U.S. title that they merged with the national title on a local board.
Music City and the NWA merged the Music City North American title to the NWA North American title.
Yeah.
I think they just started calling it the NWA North American title. I think they unified it.
Well, I think somehow Rapido was the North American champion from a promotion in Arkansas.
Ozark City.
Right.
Ozark Mountain.
Ozark Mountain, yeah.
And then that title kind of morphed into the Music City North American title. And then at some point I don't remember if he was awarded the NWA North American title or if he won it outright.
They just started defending it as they gave him that belt, and he started defending it as the NWA North American champion.
Right. They were separate at first, but then they merged together. And Wildside had a U.S. championship, and then whenever one of the Georgia boys won the national title, they merged those two together. It was an interesting day.
I'm looking, and I could be incorrect here, but remember, Reckless Youth was champion, and he was, in Vinland, New Jersey, back in your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Jaden. And then Jeff Jarrett was awarded the title basically so that he could defend it on WWE programming. The back.
Didn't he defeat Jeff Jarrett for it? I mean, I'm Jeff Jarrett. Did he defeat Barry Windham for it?
Yeah, he defeated Windham for it. Then Jarrett defeated Bradshaw. Then he lost to Chains by disqualification. Then Bradshaw beat Jarrett by disqualification. And then the belt became inactive again. And that's when, so that was in February of 1998. And then Colorado Kid started going by the North American champion in August of 1998. So I just feel like they never filled the title. They just started recognizing the Kid as the North American champion without really having a tournament or anything to do that.
Yeah, he just started wearing the belt.
Yeah.
Let's see. Defeated Recon. Colorado Kid had already won the Music City wrestling title from Recon on July 25th in Lebanon, Tennessee. This match was decided to be for the NWA title by the NWA Board of Directors and MCW. The NWA title then replaced the MCW title as both are being defended in MCW. So, yeah, I think basically they just forced it onto the Colorado Kid, who, of course, was Mike Rapata.
That guy was a weird dude, by the way.
Was he?
He was interesting. I met him once, and only briefly. Think he may have been a little bit on the high side.
Yeah.
And by a little bit, I mean, Kevin Von Erich level. And it was a very interesting. It was a very interesting thing.
So he moved out here into Southern California, and at one point he trained a lot of the talent that was out here in Southern California. So guys that I've had on this podcast, were trained by him, and it's funny because those guys, we'll call them the San Diego guys, did a podcast talking about some of the stories that things he was doing, and he was like, he booked these shows, and he had the belt on himself, and these guys would tell not me, tell the podcast that they were doing that, if someone was getting too positive of a reaction, he would punish them. He wouldn't book them for the next show because he did not want to be a less than wrestler on these cards. He needed to be the superstar. And it's really weird because a lot of these guys in San Diego attribute him with their training, but also at the same time think he's absolutely nuts.
That's insecurity right there. Honestly, there's a lot of promoters and wrestlers out there, especially ones who get a brief bit of name value, have that insecurity, and they have to do everything they can to put themselves over to make them feel like the biggest thing. And they don't work well with people that are either more talented than them or can get over more than them. That's actually a very common thing, unfortunately, in the business.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think he's always had a chip on his shoulder because, a lot of people question his run as champion and as world champion and everything like that, which I was actually okay with back in the day.
He worked his way. No, say what you will about the guy. He worked his way to a lot of places, and he got a lot of championships and wrestled a lot of big time talent. Before he was even NWA champion, he was wrestling against Terry Taylor, Jerry Lawler, Mick Foley, Tommy Wildfire Rich.
And he was over in his area.
Yeah, he was very over in his area too.
I think
he came to Texas, and the crowd took to him. I mean, I understand that he wasn't a name, but he was a decent worker for a guy that had been, pretty built up there in the NWA. He was a fine choice for a champion that he was.
I think what hurt his run as champion is so he was doing dark matches or like worldwide matches with WCW. He became NWA World's Heavyweight Champion and then was still continuing to do these dark matches and still wrestling on WCW programming and losing while still being the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. So, look, it's not the end of the world, but at the time, a lot of people left a bad taste in their mouth. Why is our world champion doing the job on WCW programming?
Was he? Because I thought that was before his reign.
I thought it was after.
I thought it was all encompassing, but I could be wrong.
Or the Three Bears of the NWA.
Well, look, he won the title in tournament, right?
Yeah, he defeated Hector Guerrero. Oh, no, excuse me. He defeated Jerry Lynn in the finals.
Jerry Flynn.
That's what I meant to say, Jerry Flynn.
And I know there was a lot of controversy over that because Flynn at the time was used as enhancement talent in WCW. And I think he was already out of WCW, but by that time he was used. And so a lot of people are going, well, why are you putting this guy up into the finals of the World Championship? And
he was booked very well in a Florida promotion that was hosting it. That's why.
Yeah. And, but, and this is where fans are fickle and whatever.
Yeah.
But I understand too, the NWA hadn't done anything to put him over or get him over or say, man, since he's left, he's been on a winning streak. He's won titles and stuff like that. It was just kind of like, when they put the world title on Black Bart here in World Class.
Yeah.
The only reason Bart got the world title was because he had wrestled for Crockett. And they go, well, people know who he is. We'll put the world title on him. Yeah, that didn't work very well.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Flynn also took the place of Dan Severn.
What?
Flynn also took the place of Dan Severn, who either had a MMA fight or a injury or something.
That I didn't know about.
I don't remember.
Dan Severn was originally in the tournament to crown the new champion.
Yeah, it wasn't. I remember when they crowned a new Texas champion here. They put like Terry Gordy and I can't remember who, another former world class star, in the tournament, and like both lost by disqualification in the semifinals.
Let me give you the night that happened in Tampa, Florida. It was called Tango in Tampa 2000 at the Tampa, Florida Fort Homer Hesterly Armory. In a six-man tag match, Cyborg, Lex Lovett, and Pepe Prado defeated Chris Nelson, Leo von Stroheim, and Vito DiNucci. DiNucci, excuse me. First round matches saw Jerry Flynn defeat Fidel Sierra, who I believe is the Cuban assassin.
Actually, technically the third Cuban assassin, yeah.
Okay, fair. Mike Rapada defeated Hector Guerrero in a first-round match. Kendall Windham and Stone Mountain went to a double countout.
Stone Mountain ended up being Abyss, in case you're wondering.
What's that?
Stone Mountain ended up being Abyss.
Oh, okay, that's great. I never knew that before. Okay, that's cool. And then in the final first round match, Greg the Hammer Valentine, my uncle, took on Joe Malenko, and that match ended in a no contest. So a 4-man tournament basically became Jerry Flynn versus Mike Rapata in the finals, where Mike Rapata defeat Jerry Flynn to become the world's heavyweight champion. That also on that card, there was a lights out first blood match between Steve Kern and B. Brian Blair.
Who won?
Steve Kern. Shortly after that, they allowed him to open up Florida Championship Wrestling. Okay, so then let's take it back. We kind of went off on a tangent there with the NWA, but let's go back to TNA, because had the NWA not stripped TNA Wrestling of, you know, the NWA name and likeness, then Kurt Angle would be a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion.
So would Samoa Joe.
Samoa Joe would be a World's Heavyweight Champion. And Sting would have been a 3-time NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. And now...
How many times would Jeff Jarrett be NWA World Heavyweight Champion?
Oh, geez. Too many to count. I'm going to look right now. See, this is kind of stuff that we should have prepared for to talk about, but I wasn't really expecting to talk about that. So as just... You know what? Did he never hold the TNA World Title?
No.
Jeff Jarrett was only the TNA King of the Mountain champion. He was never TNA World Champion. He's a 6-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. That's interesting.
Yeah, things were... By the time they started bringing in Sting and Christian Cage and everything like that, Dixie was more firmly in control.
Yeah.
And Jarrett was basically told he couldn't book himself or get what's-his-name to book him into the World Championship anymore.
Mick Foley would have been an NWA World Champion. Rob Van Dam, Jeff Hardy, Mr. Anderson, Bobby.
Say it right.
Huh?
Say it right.
Which one? Oh, Mr. Wait. Mr. Anderson. Bobby Roode, James Storm, Austin Aries, I already said Jeff Hardy, Bully Ray, Chris Sabin, Nick Aldis, Eric Young, Bobby Lashley, EC3 would have been world champion much sooner, Matt Hardy, Drew Galloway, Eddie Edwards, Alberto El Patron, Eli Drake, Pentagon Jr., Johnny Impact, Brian Cage, Sami Callihan, Tessa Blanchard? Would that have happened? Would she have been World Heavyweight Champion?
Yes.
Rich Swann, Kenny Omega, Josh Alexander, Moose, Steve Macklin, Alex Shelley. So, I mean, it certainly would look different. And if you compare the list of who were NWA World Heavyweight Champions and who were TNA World Heavyweight Champions, you got to give the nod to TNA in terms of star power. I mean, Sting would have been like a 6-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And, you know, seeing the 10 pounds of gold on Samoa Joe, honestly, is something that I hate that never happened. And selfishly, I wish he would have been the world's heavyweight champion. But knowing that an Olympic gold medalist, Kurt Angle, I mean, can you imagine the comparisons to Danny Hodge and Lou Thez if Kurt Angle had been NWA World Heavyweight Champion?
How many times did he hold the TNA title?
Kurt?
Yes.
Kurt Angle held the title, looks like 6 times. Bully Ray would have been a 2-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion.
Yeah.
They could have deleted the NWA with Matt Hardy.
Yeah.
I was going to say there would have been good and there would have been bad in the list. Did Angle ever have a really long reign as champion? Because I was not following TNA at this time.
So I will look that right now. When Kurt Angle won the title initially, he held the title for 120 days. Then you know, Sting had it for 2 days. Kurt Angle would hold it for another 180 days, and then he would win it back. after Foley. He would hold it for 91 days. Then there'd be a couple of years go by. Then in 2011, he held it for another 72 days. And yeah, I think that. Oh, and then in 2015, he held it for another 145 days. So, I mean, most of his reigns were close to 100 days or more.
About 4 months.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. We were talking one time. I just saw the other day that The Rock's been a 9-time champion in WWE. And if you total all his days as champion together, it's 367. So it's barely 2 days over a year.
Someone told me once that The Rock's entire wrestling career was about 6 years.
Full time, yeah. Probably true.
Yeah, as a top star, I don't really know, but top stars were about 4 or 5 years and before they kind of faded and went off to do everything. You know, the late 70s and early 80s kind of screwed up wrestling championships for the NWA and stuff.
How come?
Because, I mean, if you look at the 60s, there were like 4 people that held the title in the 60s. But, you know, starting with Harley Race's first title reign of just a few weeks to transition between Funk and Briscoe. And then, you know, we had the Baba thing with Briscoe and then Baba twice with Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes and Tommy Rich twice with Harley Race. I can't remember. I think it was was it 81 that the title changed hands so many times? Like Race was the champion in late 80, lost it to Baba, won it back, lost it to Rich, won it back, lost it to Dusty, and Dusty lost it to Flair. So I don't know how many title reigns that is, but that, you know, it was quite a few. And then the only NWA title reign that Ric Flair really had that interrupted his 10-year spiel was Harley Race's. After that, every time he lost it, you knew he was winning it back at the next big event. That's why I hate hot-shotting titles.
See, you say that though, but business-wise, it made Dusty, it made Harley, it made Rich until Rich's habits caught up with him.
Well,
It made the Georgia Territory. It kind of made Flair.
I understand why they did it with some, and for some of them, a lot of people learned from Jerry Lawler that when you had a guy that was up and coming, you couldn't just not eventually put a title on him for at least a little bit of time. And so that's kind of where you got but I would have put the titles on them longer than even 30 days, you know, something that just made it feel like, and not so close together.
Yeah, there was too much in a short period of time, but if done right, transitional champions and the quick succession of champions can mean something.
Yeah.
You know,
and then of course it was more impressive when Flair's first reign was like over a year and a half, a year and 9 months or something like that. So, you know, it was like, wow, after all those title changes, finally some stability.
So wasn't he originally considered a transitional champion, even though he was only for one? It's just he did so well that they decided to go with it.
Say it again.
If I remember correctly, he was, even though he got a long reign, he wasn't considered a long-term champion until he was so successful at his run.
Yeah, it was the second half of his first run that kind of he wasn't overly successful in the early part of his first run, and that he wasn't selling places out when he came in. Now he was, some people are going, well, these places were still drawing or whatever. Yeah, they were drawing what they normally drew. They weren't drawing what it was to bring the world champion in. But then his style kind of finally got him over. Fritz loved him because he thought he was perfect for his boys.
It's because he did everything he can to put his boys over. Harley still made sure Harley was Harley.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that kind of wraps up our discussion. I mean, I guess the pros, if the NWA had still remained with TNA, is that they would still be in existence. The history would look a lot different. We would have a lot more stars who were NWA World Champions. I think it would have been very cool to see the 10 pounds of gold on guys like Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle, on guys like Moose, on guys like Bobby Lashley. I think that would add to the credibility and the mystique of the 10 pounds of gold. With that being said, I think it would have hindered a lot of the positive that came in the absence of that relationship. Like, for me, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, growing out here in Southern California, a lot of those guys get an opportunity to shine. And then, having those opportunities to have that title defended in places that it probably wouldn't have. Like, I don't think we would have seen the title defended in China, or like we would have had the run that Adam Pearce had with the title had it been still the central figure in TNA. You wouldn't have had Nick Aldis's miraculous first reign as World's Heavyweight Championship, and I doubt that the title would have been part of the centerpiece of All In. So, I mean, there definitely would have been some things that were different. But looking back in looking in revisionist history, DK, would you have preferred Impact TNA to continue to have that NWA legacy?
No. I thought there were too many periods where TNA was just total crap.
What about you, Jaden?
No, I don't think so. The TNA, unfortunately, the way it was always doomed for failure. And I think now the NWA World title would have been seen in the same light.
Do you think Tessa Blanchard being NWA World Champion would have hurt the credibility of the title?
Yes.
Yeah,
because I think it hurt the credibility of the TNA title.
Right.
It was a publicity stunt that was stupid.
So, with that being said,
I think it's stupid now if all of a sudden we see Kenzie Page fighting EC3 for the Unify the Championship.
It'll be Max. Max will win. She's already won the 7 for the women, and she'll win 7 for the men. Sorry, spoiler. And she'll unify both titles, or they will unify both titles. Excuse me.
Okay, so with that being said, this is the last week of no NWA content. Of course, going into next Tuesday, there will be the return of NWA Power exclusively to an American audience on the CW app. Our pals over at the Other Alliance guys have all decided that they are going to stand with the international audience and will not be watching NWA Power until it's available for everyone to watch. I kind of joked around saying, well, I think Jaden and DK might be standing with you guys and probably won't be watching either. I don't know where I stand on it. I mean, we do the pre-party. That's kind of what I do. And it's going to be very, very different for me to do a pre-party and not actually watch the content. So I don't know for sure if I'm going to watch Power just yet. I guess it's a game time decision. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited to see the new look. But I also feel for the international audience. Jaden, DK, do either of you have anything you'd like to say about that?
Yes, we should go on strike, DK, you and me. No NWA power.
I refuse to comment on the grounds it probably won't be popular. I might watch the first episode just to see what it's like. I want to see a studio episode. I don't want to see a premiere live event or live whatever they call their thing.
Signature live event.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to see their signature live event. I want to see one of their studio shows. So if there's a studio show, I may watch the first one of those just to get an aspect of it. I'm not as bummed out by the international thing. I mean, I think it's stupid. I think they should have said something. You know, this is a problem with promoters. I had this problem in the Tharp era. I had this problem in the pro wrestling organization or whatever they were before Tharp era. You know, promoters can't just come out and say, you know, we fucked this up or we did something wrong. I mean, you know, like we were talking last time Marquez was on, and you know, we asked whatever happened to the videos that was supposed to take place for the you know,
the Reclaiming the Gold tournament.
Yeah, the Reclaiming the Glory, I think. Yeah. And it was just like, well, you know, so he told us what it was, but for a long time they would never say anything. You know, it was like we knew it wasn't coming out, but they wouldn't say that. Well, we're, you know, looking, you know, we're not going to put out an inferior product. You know, just say you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
You know, just say, hey, God, man, something that slipped past us. We apologize. But, you know, we're going to work on getting it done. Or don't even apologize. Just say, man, it's only for the U.S. audience. That's, you know, that's just the way the deal is.
And look, I'm not trying to be so
like when USA went away. Say something.
I think that's the biggest crime is that the NWA. Are we that critical of an audience? I mean, we sat through Tyrus's reign as world's heavyweight champion. We stomached, you know, Matt Cardona. We stomached all these shenanigans and all this ridiculousness for only to be like ostracized by the people who we are promoting. And I'm not saying just us, right? I'm not just saying J-Cal, DKM, and Jaden. I'm saying like all these fans who've been watching this product since, well, let's just say the Lightning One era. Let's just say from Power on, you've built up this fan base. Whether they meant to do it or not, whether they wanted to do it or not, you built up a cult following. And then with every decision, we get the silent treatment. We don't get told what's going on. So when Dave Lagana gets fired, you know, we hear that, and then everything's gone from YouTube, right? Like we didn't get told, hey, we'll be back at this date. It just radio silence. And then when they made the deal with Fight TV and all the YouTube content went away, again, they didn't communicate that. It was just gone. And then when we're going to have this great deal, guys. It's going to be the best deal for you. You pay, you know, $5 a month or whatever it was, and you have access to every single pay-per-view that comes out, and you get the show early on Tuesdays. And then when that went away, there was a little bit of communication.
Well, at first it was you could only watch the show on there.
Yeah, eventually they made it like where it would end up on YouTube later, like on a Friday. Right. But it's like they withhold this information, and it's like we're not a diminutive audience. We're not we're not destructive. For the most part, I think the NWA fan base want to support the product, and they keep doing things to make that more difficult. And you know, bad booking aside, dumb storylines, dumb, you know, gratuitous, unnecessary booking, like. Just communicate with your audience. And I think if they would have said to that international audience, not on a podcast. You know, maybe it could have come from William Patrick Corgan, or it could have come from Pat Kenny or Joe Galley or Kyle Davis in a more intimate environment instead of a live stream like this, and said, hey, look, fans of the National Wrestling Alliance, we're so excited about our deal with the CW that we're going to be, unfortunately, this is only for an American audience. We are looking for alternative means to get you this content we are so excited about. We want to get you to watch Power 2. Right now, we have some obstacles to overcome, and as soon as we do, you'll be the first to know. I don't think people would be upset.
Yeah, well, some would be upset, but I think they could live with it.
Yes.
With making people mad is, you know, that lack of communication, that lack of respect. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to. There's a lack of respect, and you know, look, me, I've been critical of the product. So if you don't like what I've had to say and everything, blah, 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 fine. But, for your basic crowd out there, it's just respectful to say something. And not saying anything. And I know sometimes what the argument is, well, we don't say anything until there's something to say. Well, there is something to say. You may not be able to say, okay, we're going to be able to get power on delay, or we're going to geo block it from the US on YouTube, but we're going to continue, there. And again, it all has to do with how the agreement was written. I don't know what the agreement was, how the agreement was written. My guess is because they are having to do something to try and get it done, and have been recommending the VPN option. And I don't have a big problem with the VPN option because I use that to watch shows in other countries. But, so for me, it's just like a natural thing. I don't have, when they say it's like, oh yeah, that's true, you can try that. So it doesn't always work, I will say, but you can at least try it. And but yeah, say something. I can't hear you.
Combined with the last fumble, and I'm going to say, like, the deal with Triller TV, maybe we should have all expected that to happen. But again, there was no communication. Hey, we've got CW. We're going to have our shows exclusively on CW. Okay, you told us that, but you never told us that our pre-existing content that we paid for, we would no longer have access to on Triller. Now, again, they can make this right, and I honestly think they're going to. I think at some point you're going to see the vast library of the NWA available on CW. Maybe even the pay-per-views as well. And that would make, I think, it right for most people. But again, like, you didn't say anything. You just took it away. And for an international audience, you didn't say anything. You're just taking it away. They won't have access to power unless they go the route of a VPN. And a lot of people are pissed. Why do I have to get a VPN? Well, sure. Like what DKM said, it's not a bad idea to have anyways. But that's not the answer. And it sure as hell shouldn't be coming from somebody who represents the NWA brand to tell me, oh, just go get a VPN. Because I think that's a bunch of bullshit. Especially for an audience, again, we're talking about people who have supported this brand through thick and thin since the Lightning One era started.
And I'm not sure of the legal ramifications, but certainly the ethical ramifications of VPNs are.
It's technically not okay
to be in to be watching from another country. To specifically.
That's what our VPNs aren't meant for. That's just what they're used for.
Yeah, right. No, VPNs are good.
Yes, everybody should have one.
I run VPNs on all my computers and my phone. VPNs are good. One of the things, there's an ethical spot that you got to figure out for yourself, is that you can put yourself on make it look like you're coming from, the UK, Germany, Philippines, Indonesia, South Africa, whatever you want.
Such as the Iraq.
And so, well, the thing with VPNs that You know, don't be sending threats to your school on a VPN thinking that you're going to be protected because it's going to be on a.
They get around that.
You know, because it's going to be on a UK server, because all that's going to happen is they'll get the warrants to figure out where you really were. So,
So, Power Rangers are in trouble. Sorry, you sounded like Alpha 1.
Yeah, wasn't it Alpha 5?
Alpha 2.5 will split the difference.
Well, anyways, so next week will be a weird week. If you tune into the other Alliance guys, I don't think they're going to be talking any NWA. The pre-party, I think I'm still going to talk NWA, and it's not against our international brethren, but that's kind of the responsibility that I decided for myself when I started doing that show, and that's, I think, the path that I should stay on. As far as we go for next week, I don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll figure it out in the meantime. But Jaden, I know that there are some events coming to rustic Glassboro, New Jersey. Could you tell us about what's coming next for the Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators?
Well, let's forget first and do the Lindenwald, because this Saturday, the Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators Championship will be defended at a MAWA event. At
correct.
The VFW, with former champion Breaker Morant looking to regain against current champion Justin Adams. That's going to be a really good match. It's going to be worth the price of admission alone. Tickets are $20. But make sure you come get it, because it's going to be worth seeing it for that match alone. Plus other dog stars you'll notice, like Vinny the Fixer and Patch, will be on the card, and luckily no Daredevil Dave Dahl.
Were they smart enough not to book him?
Yes, but Dylan Mesh will be there, so he's another guy that's recognizable. And there's a ladies match, and there's some good wrestling, and I can't wait to see it. So again, it's this Saturday. And then on April 11th, there'll be a Dangerous Adrenaline Wrestling Gladiators sold event at Rowan University. And then on April 25th, a dog event will happen at the Rowan College of Burlington County, again, a sold private event. And things are still in the plan. I have to actually get a hold of people to see what's going on. But things are still working on for other things. And there was recently talk with a new school about possibly promoting there a couple times a year.
Oh, all right.
So that will be an actual event you can go to and buy tickets.
I dig it.
Oh, I have a challenge for the Lance guys. Since they're not going to do the NWA, maybe they should choose like a couple matches from Dog and review that from the Dog YouTube page. What's that link again, Jay?
The link is youtube.com /@ Dog Pro Wrestling. And I highly suggest you becoming a subscriber to that channel, because, as our friend Jaden said, the content is updated daily, not daily, but very often.
Content was often updated whenever we have stuff to update it with.
The last match that was updated was Irish Wolf taking on Rocker Boy at the Rowan College event on April the 26th. And,
that would have been sent out earlier, but unfortunately, when I was going through to try to find something specifically, I saw that match wasn't ever actually put out there. So we made it out there.
Well, you did good, is what I'm saying, because there's a lot of content still up there. All the matches from those events have now found their way up to the YouTube channel. Of course, the match that I attended is still up there. You could watch Dave Dahl versus Tech Support, or Dylan Mesh versus Marvelous, or the Old School Empire versus Dave Dahl, Dadball, and the Minion. There's a lot of wrestling available for you to watch. Lots of great talents, and Dave Dahl. I highly recommend it.
See, we got another rousing endorsement for Dog.
Real quick, I want to answer Noob's question before we leave. We know that so it was announced that Bestia 666 posted on the social media earlier this week that he and the NWA were officially parting ways. And I don't think that that's as bad as everyone else thinks. To be quite honest, he had left the NWA already. He hasn't wrestled for the NWA since the Samhain pay-per-view. So this is kind of kind of pointless, to be quite honest. The announcement itself wasn't really noteworthy in that he was already out of the NWA. I think it's just a confirmation allowing other companies to know that he's available. I know that it's also going to, which means that your other question earlier, Noob, but I'm sorry I didn't get to it, is will the NWA will talent still leave the NWA? And the answer is yes, always. Those who are locked up under contract will be here for the length of their contract. Those who are not will always go to where the best gig is for them, whether that's them going to somewhere better like AEW or WWE, or sidestep like the promotion in Canada or the promotion in Puerto Rico. There's always that opportunity for talent to move beyond just the NWA, I think, and that's okay. That's okay. That's what the NWA is. And at some point down the road, like Cody Rhodes left the WWE to go do other things and then came back. And I think that's still something that could happen, when a guy like Bastia or Camille or Chris Adonis, when they leave the company, that door doesn't necessarily shut. It just means that for the time being, they're not there. That's okay. Do you agree, Jaden? Disagree? What do you think?
Yeah, talent always needs to go switch around. It can't just keep them there forever. Otherwise, you get staleness. So it's always good anyway for people to move on and do other things, because you can become stale as a performer too, just staying in the same place.
And the cool thing about that is, honestly, I didn't see La Rebellion getting an opportunity to challenge for the tag titles. I feel like that storyline has passed them. And I wouldn't want to see them go after the U.S. tag titles. I felt like that was beneath them. Now we're going to get to see a different story being told with Mecha Wolf. We're going to get to see a different version of Mecha Wolf. And that's not a bad thing either. DK, any thoughts on Mecha Wolf, or excuse me, on Bastia Say leaving the NWA?
Got any other news from 20 years ago?
At least somebody finally said something about it. At least they didn't keep it quiet. I mean, it wasn't the NWA, but still.
No, I mean, yeah, it's not a surprise. I mean, Mecha Wolf's already said that, they're kind of going their own ways for now. They're still friends.
They still team on the independents as well.
Well, and they might. I'm just going by what Mecha Wolf said. He goes, where they're basically doing their own thing for the time being. Not that they won't team, but that's not their focus anymore.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon in tag teams. So, yeah, fine. People come, people go. I think that's one of the things that, gets struggled with on the big promotions. When you have somebody like Miz who's been there forever and ever and ever and ever, and you just get so sick of him. And it's like, he needs to be injured and go away for a while. Kind of like we were with Nick Aldis. When they did the injury angle, it was like, great. This will give us the break we need. This will give us a chance to miss him. This will give us a chance to appreciate him. Comes back the next week. It's like, God, you're an idiot. And, we need breaks. We need time. We need opportunities to see things. I mean,
How can we miss you if you don't go away?
Exactly. I'm still waiting for Hammerstone to get signed by somebody. Somebody sign Hammerstone. Camille's been free for a month, I guess.
She just put something on social media too. You should check out your Twitter or Instagram when the show's over tonight. I know that we're both itching to get out of here. I think Jaden is too. Real quick, Luthez says, Tuesday is Mardi Gras. I'll be doing my best not to fall off a bar stool or get popped for public urination. Better than watching the NWA. And I know Luthez stands with the good fellas over at the other Alliance guys, and I can respect that as well.
Hey, if you do
I got an idea what we could do for our next show.
Go ahead.
Things better than watching the NWA.
There you go. DKM.
Hernia surgery. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, DK.
Well, how do you argue that? That's actually not a bad idea. I would just like to take this opportunity to say that if any of you are moronic enough to want to follow me on social medias, you can at DKMFWTX. Don't annoy me. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say that this last week I retired from my job, and I'm happy now. I now have more time to yell at clouds, yell at kids on my lawn, and yell at Jaden just for being stupid in general. And of course, a lot more time to make fun of Jay. How can that not bring happiness? I hope everybody was thrilled with Jay's much better half being on his show this week. It was definitely an improvement, and we're looking forward to her replacing him in the near future. So
discussions are ongoing.
Discussions are ongoing. The board is getting ready to meet to make a final vote.
And once we get to 5,000 subscribers, you guys will be doing the Alliance Guys with the Alliance Babe.
Cool. And so, yeah, that's my thing this week. I'm hungry. I'm ready to go eat.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get something to eat.
And with that, I bid you adieu. We'll see you at the matches. Thanks for joining the stream. This has been a presentation of Alliance-Wrestling.com. We genuinely appreciate your support. Would you consider subscribing so you'll never miss a future episode? I'd also like to remind you we do a live stream every Tuesday at 5 p.m. before NWA Power. You can find us on social media at The Alliance Blog. And until next time, we are The Alliance.